young millionaire needed a date for a wedding. He never thought he'd end up marrying her. Are you seriously rejecting $5,000 to eat free food and dance for one night? Nathan Steele leaned against the counter of the tiny coffee shop, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the flustered barista in front of him. Emily Harper tightened her grip on the coffee cup she was handing to the customer in line. "I'm sorry, but I don't think being a rented wedding date is my thing," she shot back, refusing to meet his gaze. Nathan didn't miss the slight tremble in her voice. She was trying to be firm, but he could tell she was tempted. Most people would jump at the opportunity he'd just offered, but Emily wasn't most people. She was stubborn, sharp-tongued, and maddeningly unimpressed by his money. "Look, I know it sounds transactional," Nathan admitted, flashing the infamous Steele smirk that had graced more tabloids than he cared to count. "But it's not. My brother's wedding is this weekend, and if I show up alone, my family will never let me hear the end of it. I just need someone to pretend for a few hours. No strings attached. You get paid, I get to avoid their judgmental stares. Everybody wins." Emily finally looked at him, her hazel eyes narrowing. "Why me? You could hire someone from an agency. There's probably a line of women who'd fake date you for free." Nathan shrugged, his tailored suit jacket shifting effortlessly over his broad shoulders. "Because you're real." "You're not like them." Emily blinked, caught off guard. Was that supposed to be a compliment? She couldn't tell. All she knew was that Nathan Steele, the youngest millionaire in New York City's real estate scene, had been walking into this coffee shop every morning for the past month, ordering an overpriced latte he barely drank, and chatting with her like he didn't have a penthouse office waiting for him. She didn't trust it, or him. "I'm not interested," she said firmly, turning her attention to the next customer. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. He wasn't used to hearing no. Not from women, not from business deals, and definitely not from someone who worked in a place where the tip jar barely had enough to cover a cab ride. But Emily Harper wasn't just anyone, and that was exactly why he couldn't let this go. "All right," he said, stepping back and holding up his hands in mock defeat. "Just think about it. The offer stands until Friday." Emily watched him leave, his confident stride and designer shoes making it clear he didn't belong in her world. She exhaled, trying to shake off the strange mix of irritation and curiosity he always left in his wake. Nathan Steele needed a date for a wedding, and for some inexplicable reason he wanted her. By Friday afternoon, Emily was pacing in her tiny apartment, her phone clutched in her hand. She'd been thinking about Nathan's offer all week, no matter how hard she tried not to. $5,000. That was more than she made in 2 months. It could pay off her credit card bill, cover rent, and still leave enough to fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom. But it wasn't just the money, it was him. Nathan Steele wasn't the kind of man who walked into your life and disappeared quietly. He was charming, infuriating, and way out of her league. Emily groaned, dropping onto the couch. What was the worst that could happen? It was one night, and if he was lying about the no-strings-attached part, she could always walk away. Before she could overthink it, she dialed his number. "Emily," Nathan answered on the second ring, his voice smooth and confident. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me." "Don't flatter yourself," she snapped, her nerves making her more defensive than she intended. "I'll do it. But only because I could use the money." "Of course," he said, his tone laced with amusement. "Text me your address, I'll pick you up tomorrow at 6. Emily ended the call, her heart racing. What had she just gotten herself into? The next evening, she stood in front of her mirror, fidgeting with the hem of the dress she'd borrowed from her roommate. It was a simple black cocktail dress, modest but flattering. She tried to make herself look presentable without overdoing it. After all, this wasn't a date, it was a business transaction. When the doorbell rang, Emily grabbed her purse and opened the door, her breath catching at the sight of Nathan. He was waiting in the hallway, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his hair slicked back just enough to look polished but not stiff. "You clean up well," he said, his gaze sweeping over her with unmistakable approval. "Thanks," she muttered, trying not to stare at him. He extended his arm and she hesitated before taking it. "Ready?" he asked, his smile revealing the dimple she'd only seen glimpses of before. "As I'll ever be," she replied, letting him lead her down to the waiting town car. The wedding was held at an extravagant estate just outside the city. As they walked through the grand entrance, Emily couldn't help but feel like she'd stepped into a movie. Crystal chandeliers, floral arrangements that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and guests dripping in designer labels filled the room. Nathan placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward his family. The warmth of his touch sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Just smile and pretend you're madly in love with me," he whispered, his breath tickling her ear. Emily forced a smile, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" "Maybe a little," he admitted, his grin widening. As the evening went on, Emily found herself relaxing. Nathan's family was welcoming, if a bit nosy, and she was surprised by how easily she and Nathan fell into a rhythm. He made her laugh, teased her just enough to keep her on her toes, and even danced with her when his mother insisted. For a moment, she almost forgot it was all fake. Almost. But as the night drew to a close and Nathan twirled her around the dance floor one last time, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. And judging by the way Nathan was looking at her like she was the only person in the room, she wasn't the only one who felt it. "Why didn't you tell me she was this stunning?" The voice came from behind them, smooth and teasing, as a man approached with a champagne flute in hand. He was tall, with the same sharp jawline and dark hair as Nathan, though his features were softer, less intense. Nathan groaned under his breath. "Emily, meet my brother Daniel." Daniel grinned, extending a hand. "The groom." And clearly the less charming Steele brother, since Nathan managed to convince you to come with him tonight. Emily shook his hand, her lips twitching in amusement. "I wouldn't say convince, more like relentlessly badgered." Daniel laughed, a deep, genuine sound. "Sounds about right." "He's persistent, isn't he?" "Can we not do this right now?" Nathan interjected, his tone dry. "Relax, little brother," Daniel said, clapping Nathan on the shoulder. "I just wanted to meet the woman who's got you looking like you're actually enjoying yourself for once." Emily glanced at Nathan, surprised to find a flicker of something. Was it embarrassment? Across his face, he quickly covered it with a smirk. "You're imagining things," Nathan replied smoothly. "Now go find your bride." "I'm sure she's wondering where you are." Daniel gave Emily a wink before sauntering off, leaving the two of them standing alone again. "Your brothers." "Charming," Emily said, sipping the champagne Nathan had handed her earlier. "He's a pain," Nathan muttered, though there was a hint of fondness in his voice. "Don't let him fool you." Emily chuckled, her gaze drifting across the room. She noticed a group of women at a nearby table casting glances their way, whispering behind their hands. She stiffened, suddenly hyper-aware of how out of place she must look among these wealthy, polished guests. Nathan followed her gaze and leaned in, his voice low and reassuring. "Ignore them." "They're just jealous," she raised an eyebrow. "Jealous of what?" "Of you." Emily gave a short laugh, but Nathan's expression was serious. "I mean it," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "You're not like anyone in this room, Emily. That's what makes you unforgettable." Her breath hitched, and for a moment she couldn't think of a single thing to say. The intensity in his gaze was disarming, and she found herself wondering if there was more truth to his words than she wanted to admit. Before she could respond, a woman in a glittering silver gown approached, her smile warm but her eyes sharp. "Nathan." I was hoping to catch you tonight. She barely glanced at Emily before looping her arm through Nathan's. Nathan's jaw tightened. Vanessa, he said curtly. He gently but firmly removed her hand. Vanessa's smile faltered, her gaze flicking to Emily. And who's this? This is Emily, Nathan said, his tone cool. My date. Vanessa's perfectly arched eyebrow lifted. I see. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Emily. Her words dripped with insincerity. Emily forced a polite smile. You too. Vanessa lingered a moment longer as if expecting Nathan to say something else, but when he didn't, she finally walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Friend of yours? Emily asked dryly. Not exactly, Nathan replied, his expression dark. Emily tilted her head, studying him. He hesitated, then sighed. Yes. A long time ago. Ah, she said, trying to keep her tone light. Well, she's clearly still interested. Nathan turned to her, his expression softening. I'm not. The sincerity in his voice sent a flutter through her chest. Before she could respond, the band struck up a lively tune and Nathan held out his hand. Dance with me, Emily hesitated. Again. Come on, he said, a playful smile tugging at his lips. I promised you free food and dancing, didn't I? She rolled her eyes but took his hand, letting him lead her back to the dance floor. As they moved to the music, Emily found herself relaxing again, the tension from Vanessa's interruption fading away. Nathan was an annoyingly good dancer, and he seemed to know exactly how to make her laugh, even when she was determined not to. But as the song slowed, so did their movements until they were swaying gently, his hand resting lightly on her waist. Thank you for coming tonight, Nathan said, his voice low. Emily looked up at him, surprised by the sudden seriousness in his tone. You already paid me, you don't have to thank me. That's not what I mean, he said, his eyes searching hers. I mean, it's been a long time since I've felt this. He stopped himself, shaking his head as if trying to find the right words. Emily's heart thudded in her chest, but before she could ask him to continue, someone tapped Nathan's shoulder. Sorry to interrupt, Daniel said, though he didn't look particularly sorry. Nathan, Mom wants to talk to you for a minute. Nathan sighed, clearly reluctant to leave. I'll be right back, he told Emily, his hand lingering on hers for a moment longer than necessary before he followed Daniel. Emily stepped off the dance floor, suddenly feeling a bit exposed without Nathan by her side. She wandered over to the bar, ordering a glass of sparkling water and trying to shake the strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. You're braver than most, a voice said beside her. Emily turned to see Vanessa again, her expression unreadable. Excuse me, Emily asked, her tone cautious. Coming here with Nathan, Vanessa said, swirling the wine in her glass. You must know how women like me tend to intimidate women like you. Emily's eyes narrowed. Women like me? Vanessa gave a small, condescending laugh. Oh, don't take it the wrong way. I just mean, you're clearly not from his world, and trust me, that world, it'll chew you up and spit you out. Emily's grip tightened on her glass, but she forced herself to stay calm. Thanks for the advice, I'll keep that in mind. Vanessa smirked, as if she'd won some unspoken battle, and sauntered off. Emily exhaled slowly, her chest tight with frustration. She didn't belong here, that much was clear. But as her eyes found Nathan across the room, laughing softly with an older woman who must have been his mother, she couldn't bring herself to regret saying yes to tonight. Because for reasons she couldn't quite explain, Nathan's steel made her feel like she just might belong after all. You looked like you needed rescuing. Nathan's voice came from behind her, smooth and familiar. He appeared at her side, holding a fresh glass of champagne as if he'd been watching the entire encounter. His presence was like a balm to the tension still lingering in her chest after Vanessa's comments. Emily glanced at him, her lips curving into a wry smile. What gave me away? The clenched jaw or the death grip on my glass? Both, Nathan replied with a soft chuckle, his gaze scanning her face. What did Vanessa say to you? Nothing I couldn't handle, she said, taking the champagne he offered. She swirled it in her hand, hesitating. She just wanted to remind me that I don't belong here. Nathan's jaw tightened, and his playful demeanor vanished. She had no right to say that. It's fine, Emily said quickly, not wanting to make a scene. She's not wrong. This isn't my world, Nathan. It could be, he said, his voice quiet but firm. The intensity in his eyes made her heart skip. If you wanted it to be. Emily blinked, caught off guard. What's that supposed to mean? Nathan opened his mouth to respond. But before he could, an older woman in an elegant emerald gown approached them, her face lighting up when she saw him. Nathan, there you are. I've been looking for you. Hi, Mom, Nathan said, his voice softening as he leaned in to kiss her cheek. And this must be the lovely Emily, his mother interrupted, turning her warm, curious smile on her. I've heard so much about you. Emily froze, heard so much. What had Nathan told her? It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Steele, she said, regaining her composure. Please call me Catherine, she said, waving off the formality. Nathan, darling, come find me later. I want to hear all about how you two met. With a knowing wink at Emily, she disappeared back into the crowd. Emily turned to Nathan, her eyebrows raised. What exactly have you been saying about me? Nothing but the truth, he said with a smirk, though there was an edge of vulnerability in his tone. That you're smart, stubborn, and have the best coffee-making skills in Manhattan. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed. You're insufferable. And yet, here you are, he teased, his hand brushing hers as he gestured toward the dance floor again. Come on. One last dance before we make our escape. Emily hesitated, glancing around the glittering room. Escape? Nathan leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. I'm taking you somewhere better. Curiosity piqued, she let him lead her back to the dance floor. They swayed together to the slow rhythm of the music, and for a moment, the world around them disappeared. Nathan's hand rested on the small of her back, guiding her effortlessly, while his other hand held hers as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You know, Emily said softly, her gaze meeting his, you're surprisingly good at this. Dancing? No, she said with a small laugh. Making someone forget they're completely out of their depth. Nathan's expression softened, and he pulled her a fraction closer. Maybe that's because you're not. You belong here more than you think, Emily. Her chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice, but before she could respond, the song ended and Nathan stepped back, offering her his arm. Ready? For what? You'll see, he said with a mysterious smile. Minutes later, Emily found herself stepping into a sleek black car, Nathan sliding in beside her. The driver nodded at him and pulled away from the estate, the city lights reflecting off the glossy windows. Where are we going? She asked, watching as the crowded streets of Manhattan came into view. You'll see, Nathan said again, his eyes sparkling with amusement as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. But first, I have something for you. Emily's heart skipped as she stared at the box. What is that? Relax, Nathan said with a chuckle, opening the lid to reveal a delicate gold bracelet, its surface encrusted with tiny diamonds. It's just a thank you gift. For being my date tonight and putting up with my family. I can't accept that, she said, shaking her head. Yes, you can, he said, taking her wrist gently and fastening the bracelet before she could protest further. And you will. Nathan, it's not up for debate, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You deserve it. Emily glanced down at the bracelet, its soft sparkle catching the dim light of the car. It was beautiful, too beautiful. She felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. You're impossible. And you're welcome, he replied with a grin, The car slowed to a stop and Nathan stepped out first, holding the door open for her. Emily's breath caught as she looked up at the building in front of them, a rooftop restaurant, its glowing sign promising an unforgettable view of the city. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Come on," he said, offering her his hand. "I figured we could use a proper meal after all that wedding cake." The rooftop was breathtaking. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed above them, and the glittering skyline of New York stretched out in every direction. A private table awaited them near the edge, set with flickering candles and a bottle of chilled champagne. "This is..." Emily trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "Over the top," Nathan suggested, pulling out her chair. "Perfect," she corrected, sitting down. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. Nathan told her about growing up in the shadow of his older brother, about how he'd built his business from the ground up after refusing to rely on his family's wealth. Emily, in turn, shared stories of her childhood, her struggles to make ends meet, and the dreams she'd put on hold. "I admire you, you know," Nathan said, his voice soft. "You've been through so much, and yet you're still standing, still fighting." Emily looked down at her plate, her cheeks flushing. "I don't know about that." "I do," he said firmly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You're stronger than you realize, Emily." She met his gaze, her heart pounding. There was something about the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the world who mattered. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "Nathan," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "whatever this is, it feels like it's real," he finished for her, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. She nodded, unable to speak. "It is," he said simply, "at least for me." The confession hung between them, heavy and electric. Emily's mind raced, her walls trembling under the weight of his words. But before she could respond, Nathan stood, pulling her up with him. "Come here," he said, leading her to the edge of the rooftop. They stood in silence, the city sprawling out below them, the air humming with unspoken emotions. Nathan turned to her, his hand cupping her cheek. "I don't know where this is going," he admitted, his voice raw. "But I know I don't want it to end." Emily's breath hitched, and before she could second-guess herself, she closed the distance between them, her lips brushing his in a soft, tentative kiss. When they pulled apart, Nathan's eyes searched hers, filled with a mix of hope and determination. "Stay," he whispered, and for the first time that night, Emily didn't feel out of place. She felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Nathan's penthouse, casting golden beams across the sleek, modern furniture. Emily stood near the floor-to-ceiling glass, staring out at the breathtaking view of Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly below her, a sea of steel and glass, bustling with life. She wrapped her arms around herself, the events of the night before still fresh in her mind. Nathan's confession, the rooftop kiss, the way he had held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, it all felt like a dream. But now, in the stark light of day, reality crept in, and the walls she'd carefully built around herself began to rise again. "You're up early," Nathan's voice broke the silence, smooth and warm as he stepped into the room. He was barefoot, wearing a crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar and dark slacks. Despite his casual appearance, he exuded an effortless elegance that made Emily's breath hitch. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, turning to face him. "This place is incredible." She gestured toward the penthouse, the sheer luxury of it almost overwhelming. The polished marble floors, the designer furniture, the abstract art on the walls, it was a world she'd only ever seen in magazines. Nathan leaned against the doorway, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's just a place. The view's better when you're here." Emily rolled her eyes, though her cheeks flushed. "You really don't turn it off, do you?" "Not when it comes to you," he said, his tone soft but serious. She looked away, unsure how to respond. Her fingers toyed with the edge of the bracelet still on her wrist, a reminder of the night they'd shared. Nathan stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Emily, talk to me. What's going on in that head of yours?" She hesitated, then sighed. "This, Nathan, all of this, it's overwhelming. Last night was amazing, but now I'm standing here in your penthouse, wearing a bracelet that probably costs more than my rent for a year, and I can't help but wonder, what are we doing?" Nathan frowned, his blue eyes searching hers. "What do you mean?" "I mean this, us," she said, gesturing between them. "You're a millionaire. You live in a world of private jets, rooftop dinners, and people like Vanessa, and I'm me. I work in a coffee shop and barely make enough to get by. How does this make sense?" Nathan's expression softened, and he reached for her hands, holding them firmly. "It makes sense because it's real. Because when I'm with you, none of that other stuff matters. Not the money, not the status, just you." Emily's throat tightened, but she shook her head. "But what if I can't fit into your world? What if—" "Stop," Nathan interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "You don't have to fit into my world, Emily. I don't want someone who fits. I want someone who challenges me, who keeps me grounded, who makes me laugh when I'm taking life too seriously. And that's you." Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Nathan, I don't want to be some temporary fling. I can't be that." "You're not," he said without hesitation. "You're so much more than that. And I'll spend every day proving it to you if I have to." Emily opened her mouth to argue, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped her. She felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble again, and it terrified her. Nathan seemed to sense her hesitation, and he stepped closer, his hands cupping her face. "Emily, I know this is scary. Believe me, I didn't expect any of this either, but I don't want to let you go. Not now, not ever." Her breath hitched, and for a moment she forgot how to speak. But then he leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, and the last of her defenses crumbled. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll try." Nathan smiled, his relief palpable. "That's all I'm asking for." 2 weeks later, Emily found herself in an entirely different world once again. Nathan had invited her to a charity gala, and despite her initial protests, he'd insisted on sending a stylist to help her prepare. Now, as she stood in front of the mirror in a floor-length emerald gown that hugged her curves perfectly, she hardly recognized herself. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and the diamond earrings Nathan had sent earlier that day sparkled against her skin. "You look stunning," Nathan said as he stepped into the room, his eyes raking over her appreciatively. He was dressed in a classic black tuxedo, and the sight of him made her heart skip a beat. "You're not so bad yourself," she teased, though her cheeks warmed under his gaze. He stepped closer, offering his arm. Ready to make an entrance, Emily hesitated, glancing at her reflection one last time. "Are you sure about this?" "I mean, these are your people, not mine." "They're just people," Nathan said, his voice steady. "And trust me, they'll love you, but even if they don't, I don't care. I'm not bringing you there for them, I'm bringing you there for me." Her heart swelled at his words, and she nodded, taking his arm. "Okay. Let's do this." The gala was held at a grand ballroom in the heart of the city, with crystal chandeliers and gold accents adorning every surface. As they entered, all eyes seemed to turn toward them, whispers rippling through the crowd. Nathan held her hand firmly, his presence steadying her as they made their way through the room. He introduced her to countless people, business partners, friends, even a few celebrities, and each time, he spoke of her with pride and admiration. But it wasn't until later in the evening, when Nathan stepped onto the stage to make a speech, that Emily truly understood how much she meant to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice commanding yet warm. "Tonight, we're here to support a cause that's close to my heart. But before I get into that, I want to take a moment to thank someone who's become very important to me. His eyes found Emily in the crowd, and her breath caught as he smiled at her. "Emily Harper," he said, his voice steady. "You've reminded me of what truly matters in life. Your kindness, your strength, your unwavering determination, it's humbling. And I'm so incredibly lucky to have you by my side." The room erupted in applause, but Emily barely heard it. Her heart was racing, her cheeks warm, and she couldn't tear her eyes away from Nathan. As he stepped down from the stage and made his way back to her, she felt a surge of emotion she couldn't contain. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to," he replied, taking her hands in his, "because I meant every word." Tears filled her eyes, and she smiled through them. "You're impossible, you know that. And you're unforgettable," he said, pulling her into his arms. In that moment, surrounded by the glittering lights of the gala and the hum of the crowd, Emily realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Nathan had broken through her walls, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be with him. 6 months later, in a small, intimate ceremony overlooking the ocean, Emily Harper became Emily Steele. As Nathan slid the ring onto her finger and vowed to love her for the rest of his life, she knew without a doubt that she'd made the right choice. And as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the world faded away, leaving only the two of them and the love they'd found against all odds.